The Lovable Outlaw. 100 years ago, a man named Otto Wood was sitting in Central Prison in Raleigh writing an autobiography. In it, he said, "There is not a man in North Carolina or any other state who values a man's life higher than I do." But people who have researched his life say the Wilkes County man killed several people.
And just about every time he went to jail, he seemed to find a way to escape. Fox 8's Michael Hennessy joins us with the story of the man known as Otto Wood, the Bandit. Michael.
Yeah, Neil, Katie, Wood's legacy is complicated. Some saw him as a Robin Hood type figure. Others knew him as a hardened criminal, born in a challenging time with challenges of his own. But one thing is for sure, and that is that he left a legacy.
And it's an onion you'll never get to the center of.
A man immortalized in text and song.
Otto's got legs. He's not going away.
Known for striking fear in children.
I didn't know a thing about Otto Wood until my mama told me.
And as a friend of men.
That he was a 20s era Robin Hood.
A disabled man in the Depression era.
It was kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde without Bonnie.
Taking what he needed and leaving when he wanted.
He escaped from the Raleigh State Penitentiary 4 times.
Until he was proved mortal on the eve of a new year.
And it said, "Otto, why didn't you run?" when the sheriff pulled out that .44 gun.
Central Prison, Raleigh, North Carolina, 1926.
He wrote his own autobiography.
Otto Wood, an illiterate man with one hand, penned an autobiography with the help of a warden.
He got in trouble, stayed in trouble, didn't like the law.
"I have 3 motives for publishing this book," he said. "One is to let the public judge for themselves
as to whether I am desperate and as I've been pictured in the newspapers. It is true I have never lived the life I should have. I have never had the opportunity others had. But things have been mightily exaggerated in regard to me."
And for a crooked man, there was plenty to set straight.
He just grew up mean. He's a mean baby, I guess. Some people were just that way.
Otto Wood was at a disadvantage from day one.
The lady that helped when he was born, she put splints on his legs, and she later said if she'd known how he ran from the law all the time, she wouldn't have fixed his legs.
Birthed in Wilkes County in 1894, he lived with what some say was a clubbed foot. At that point, he had 2 hands, and just a few years after dropping out of school at the age of 7, he started putting them to use.
In 1904, when he was brought into jail and into court for stealing a bicycle. He was 11 years old at that time.
That first stay was in this very cell at the then Wilkes County Jail.
He got in trouble, stole a bicycle or something when he was just a little boy, and he just kind of got marked.
With his mother by his side in court, he was set free on a promise of good behavior.
That next court session came, and he was brought into court for a different crime, for stealing 2 guns at that time. He was still 11 years old.
About 7 years later, Wood wrote he'd been working as a locomotive foreman and claimed he lost his hand in an accident. But there's another theory about how that happened.
He laid his shotgun on a stump and he went to steal a rabbit out of somebody else's gum, rabbit gum, and the gun fell over and discharged, and it mangled his left hand so bad they had to amputate it.
Now being short a foot and a hand made it even harder to find work. So he continued making his own, writing, I have been
guilty of larceny of automobiles, making and handling whiskey, and gambling. I just started in wrong, and instead of getting out, kept on getting in deeper and deeper."
Yeah, he was a big-time fugitive, nationwide.
After being sentenced to prison in Virginia, Wood made what he wrote is the worst mistake a prisoner can make. He escaped.
Well, now, a man with 1 hand and 1 foot has to have some buddies. And he was just the proverbial likable outlaw. Everybody helped him with it, you know.
In his words, he made a wild dash for the mountains,
through which the officers chased me like they would a rabbit for 3 days and nights. I had several close calls, but the good Lord was with me and I escaped unhurt. Soon I was drinking and gambling again.
People, their primary source of information was newspapers, and newspapers love to cover crime.
And Wood gave him plenty of material.
And he did most all his so-called nefarious things way away from here. Greensboro, on past, as far away as Tennessee and Texas.
But he couldn't stay away from home for long.
But when he came back to town, it was like Santa Claus came back to town in a brand new Ford with a pocket full of money, giving money to the men, food to the families, clothing for the kids and the other things.
He was famous. Every time they put him in jail, he'd escape.
And even when he was charged with killing a man,
The legend is that he escaped a total of 10 times.
they couldn't keep him away.
He said that Otto carved a gun out of a bar of soap and stuck it in the guard's back and told him to take him for a ride.
And during one of the stays in prison, Wood said being apart from his loved ones was an awful price he was paying and death would be easier. A few years later, he met that fate. We will detail his continued escapes from prison and the lawman he couldn't escape back here tomorrow at 6.
He always said he didn't kill anybody who did not deserve it. Well, people who've researched the life of Wilkes County outlaw Otto Wood say he took the lives of a half dozen people, and lives weren't the only thing he took that landed him in jail.
But even when he was held accountable for those crimes, he found ways to not live out those sentences. Fox 8's Michael Hennessy joins us with more on Wood's escapes. Michael.
And Neil, Katie, in his autobiography, Wood expressed regret for his escapes from prison, but he did it again anyway after writing it, with his final escape coming just months before his death.
He stole the car from where he robbed the pawn shop, and then days later the car was returned.
A complicated criminal.
When he was a kid, he would watch Otto shoot coins out of the air with his pistol. He was just that good.
By the 19-teens, Otto Wood's checkered past was notoriously known, not only in North Carolina,
Everybody that knew him liked him. He just happened to have trouble here and there, you know.
but nationally.
I used to tell him that Otto taught Junior Johnson how to drive, the NASCAR driver, you know.
At 19, he served his first prison sentence in Virginia because, as he put it, a girl he used to call on had him arrested, quote, on the plea that I had promised to marry her and I was the father of her child. It would be the first penitentiary proved unable to cage Otto Wood.
He actually got out and everything from in a culvert pipe to a load of laundry being hauled away.
Wood described his life as a fugitive, saying,
Starting with smaller crimes, he goes blindly on to the bigger ones.
He was able to get some time off, not for good behavior.
After his first escape, he made his way to Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. He said he wore 2 big guns, got in some mix-ups, and was
Lucky that it did not get killed. And fortunate that it did not have to kill anybody during the 2 years I remained in the far west.
that would change.
He actually killed 6 people in the course of his career, criminal career, if you want to call it that. But he always said he never killed anybody that didn't deserve it.
He described exchanging tires on a stolen car with a fellow who was in bed sound asleep, and getting captured in Kentucky, brought back to prison in Tennessee, escaping again before making his way back to North Carolina. Just could not stay away, he said.
Persistent in getting whatever he wanted and taking what he needed.
And when he came back,
But he was a 20s era Robin Hood of this area.
he was rarely empty-handed.
I've said many times that people have stood there and told me their grandmother said she never had a pair of store-bought shoes but what Otto Wood gave them to her.
And well, that giving nature had him in good standing with some.
There was one guy that told us that his father said that, Otto was crippled, but said you could trust Otto Wood. He was a good man. That he would walk as far as he had to walk to not steal a poor man's car.
There are conflicting accounts when it comes to his family's feelings.
I'm sure there were certain members of his family, even if they would take him in, they didn't appreciate what he was doing.
But there is no denying the authorities were always on the lookout. Capture after capture and subsequent escapes reaching the double digits.
I read somewhere he shot him, Texas Ranger shot him in the chest and captured him and brought him back in he healed. He didn't die from that.
In October of 1923, Wood made his way to Greensboro and pawnbroker A.W. Kaplan. He pawned a watch and later came back to claim it. After a disagreement, Wood said Kaplan ordered him out and came after him with a stick.
He raised the stick to strike me, and I hit him on the head with my gun. In making a second stroke, the gun fired and the bullet grated the skin on his shoulder.
Just chronicle the story of him kind of going through life, and about how the first time when some guy died and he went to prison for a while for that.
Kaplan died. Wood was convicted and sent to Central Prison in Raleigh. There he would make what he called one of the most daring getaways in the history of the state prison.
He had 4 escapes from Central Prison in Raleigh from 1923 up until 1930.
And the final day of 1930 would mark an end to his running.
We're convinced that he committed suicide by police. He had just been in jail so many times. They had him caught, and he pulled his gun and they shot him, you know.
But before Wood was killed, he married a woman while on the run and got her pregnant. And the family members he left behind have strong ties right here in the Piedmont Triad. We're going to talk about how they view his legacy back here tomorrow night at 6.
If you go to East Ennis and Lee Streets in downtown Salisbury, you'll find a plaque marking the spot where notorious Wilkes County outlaw Otto Wood was killed on New Year's Eve back in 1930.
But that is far from all there is to remember him by. There is blood relatives who still call the state home. Fox 8's Michael Hennessy joins us here in the studio. Michael, the story you get about Wood depends on who you ask.
Yeah, Neil, Katie, some of those people he left behind, it seems, didn't want his memory to live on. But tonight, 100 years after he wrote his autobiography, others consider it a glimpse into where they came from.
I didn't know a thing about Otto Wood until my mama told me.
Charles Mathis tells the story as if he was there. But years before he was born, outlaw Otto Wood turned up on his parents' steps.
She recognized him immediately because she grew up in the same town he did. He had his hat pulled down, but she recognized. It had been 20 years since she'd seen him.
Mathis's father ran a store on this very land and carried change for his customers. That's why he thinks Otto Wood was looking for Mr. Mathis.
And she called down here, 58, that was the telephone number, said, "Get out of that store right now. Otto Wood is looking for you."
The two never did cross paths, and Wood started his way south.
I think it was 3 days from my house to Salisbury, but I heard that he stopped in Boonville and got gas.
At this point, people were so infatuated with Wood's ways, even ones trying to sell gas were using his likeness.
December 31st of 1930, the last day of the year, and on a street in Salisbury.
Salisbury Police Chief R.L. Rankin was plenty familiar, and when those two men had a run-in.
It said it was a shootout, but I'm not sure how many shots were actually fired back and forth.
Some think Wood decided he was tired of running.
We think he was just ready to go. He'd had enough.
News of Wood's death spread as far as his travels.
And he lived right next door to Otto Wood at the time he was killed in Salisbury. He said, "My father grieved that man like a brother." Said he never had a better friend.
And while the numbers, much like the details of his life story, are contested, people traveled from all over to see his body.
We had a guy here named Ben Wood who said there was some relation to him, and he said he was a little boy and his dad took him to not to the funeral, but to the viewing, he said. And he swore there were 3,000 people there. I guess you asked enough people to get to 10,000, but there was at least 2,000 or 3,000 at the wake.
I mean, it's kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde type setting, you know. I mean, people came to view those bodies. It was a lot like that, but on, you know, a smaller level, of course. Smaller town. They weren't in Dallas, Texas. They were in Salisbury.
And it was the people not in the town where he lived, but the one where he died, who sent him home.
The people of Salisbury passed the hat and raised enough money to pay for shipping him to West Virginia so he'd be very close to his mama, and paid for the funeral and all that stuff, all just local contributions from the people of Salisbury that they pitched in.
He was months removed from his fourth escape from Central Prison in Raleigh and from his marriage to a woman named Celia.
She married him on the run.
About 9 months after that last escape, Celia Wood gave birth to twins Ruby and Reuben Wood.
Say, hey, you're just like your daddy, you're no good. That's what they would tell her twin brother all the time.
Celia only lived for a few more years. The twins found themselves in the care of other family members.
She grew up mostly, I guess, in High Point and Greensboro area.
Eventually, Ruby gave birth to children of her own, including Del Slifer.
My mother actually told me when I was about 13. She kept it all secret. We didn't know anything about him other than he died before she was born.
Before then, all Del knew came from newspaper clippings he wasn't supposed to find. Articles detailing his grandfather doing things he wasn't supposed to do.
Sold them to that guy, and he stole them later from him after he sold them to him. And he sold the guns a second time to a lady up there and got money out of them again, and then stole them from her and sold them again.
It's something he's been open about as he's carried on the Wood bloodline.
I told her, I said, I got one grandfather that worked for the government. I got one grandfather that worked against the government. I said, I won't be half bad. That's what I'd tell her.
And something he's been able to embrace since his mother went to her final resting place just a couple years ago.
My mother said that her life and her twin brothers, they had a tough time because of their dad.
The story of a man who played the hand he was dealt.
There were desperate times. It was during the Depression.
But only by his own rules.
The man's life was an amazing life. He was born with a deformed foot and walked with a limp his entire life.
A story that may never be all truth.
He said he till his dying day, he didn't mean to kill him.
Still being written by the people who are part of it.
You know, your life experiences make you who you are.
Wood was buried in Coaldale, West Virginia. Del and his family went up there to try to see his gravesite for themselves, but they had to stop when the road got too treacherous. Pretty fitting for a man who, for much of his life, didn't want to be found.